Hello, everybody. I'm Dennis Tardon, and this is
I don't know who I am, but what I'm doing right now is I'm sharing into the main group here because Mark Zuckerberg has changed all of the algorithms. On June 10th, he changed everything. So now we are totally live on Facebook. So we are here today. You and I love memoirs. We love to read memoirs, and some of them we read
yes,
together. And this one we listened to as an audiobook read by the author herself, Crystal Hefner, who is the widow of Hugh Hefner of the Playboy brand, right?
mhm,
I had a short list of memoirs that I gave to you, and you chose this from my short list. So
exactly.
I thought that
And,
was
and we also have a very much both of us enjoy it if the memoir is read on an audiobook by the author. This is
right.
important to me. I mean, we read Fei Lee's book on artificial intelligence.
Mhm.
It was not read by her, but that's the only one that we've done. But Kara Swisher and the others that we've done,
Laura Siegel,
Laura Siegel, all that. So it's
Pamela
important to get that sense.
Anderson, Barbara
But
Streisand.
with Crystal Hefner, now this is important because in the arc, because at my age, I was in the age of of Playboy in the 50s and the
Mhm.
60s and this that had come out. So I got a chance to experience this from the male side
Thank you.
of the how did you
Well, I
experience
wanted to hear about that. Yeah, absolutely.
oh all
I'm
right,
just playing some
this is
B-roll
the
with you.
book. This is
Yeah.
the book, Say Only Good Things by Crystal Hefner. And this is and I love the subhead, Surviving Playboy and Finding Myself, because this truly was a journey. This
Hmm.
was her journey from being being a young model who's just able to get into the Playboy mansion the first time, and then to become one of the girlfriends of Hugh Hefner, and then going through all the body plastic surgery that she was required to do in order to maintain this, all of the all of the all of the infighting that there was in order to maintain to stay at the top of the heap of this, and what it did to her self-image and what it did to her self-esteem and her self-respect as she was going through this process, and how she came out the other side, and the amount of therapy that she's gone through this, and the work that she's doing in order to be able to become a whole person, and also how the Playboy idea, the ideal of what a woman should be and how a woman should be and how she should relate to men and what she should be in that, was so pernicious and so damaging, not just to her but to so many people around. And she is part of bringing this and talking about it, and really talking about how do we see this in 2024 and beyond. How do we see things in new ways? So that was the piece about it, and I found it to be an enormously evocative piece of work, and I highly recommend it to anyone that would like to explore what the culture was from the 1950s all the way up to throughout the sexual revolution. And in it, I believe she makes it very clearly that Hef got stuck there. That was his home. He did not grow past that. He used had some of the people on the outside, but he was stuck there. That was his whole raison d'être, was being this iconic person that was every male wanted to be, in very much like a sultan who had a harem.
Right, exactly. So Crystal was with him at the end, literally at his deathbed. And when we read this together, I was so fascinated, and I said, "Well, I wanted to know how much he had changed or grown over his life and how much he hadn't." So I did go back and started watching some of the A&E special that came out after he died, where they interviewed not Crystal, but all these people who were with him in the 70s, his girlfriends in the 70s and the 80s, and even people who knew him in his youth. And I started to understand why Crystal, when you talked about how he really got stuck there, that's actually true. The toxic black mold that was in the mansion was from the 70s. He would not allow anything in that mansion to be changed. He was very rigid and very stuck in his ways. He was, Crystal says he was just a sad little boy who never grew up, and that she felt so bad for him. And one of his main girlfriends from the 70s was interviewed on the A&E special. And ironically, she said, not ironically, but she said exactly the same thing of him in the 70s. She said he was a sad little boy. His All of his early girlfriends cheated on him or left him or did not respect him. He was the boy that was never chosen at the dances. He could not get female affection. And that turned him really mean against women. And he wanted to show the guys that he really, it was really a performance for guys. He wanted to be known as the man. And Crystal talks about that, that he needed to be the man. So he gave up on women very early in life. And this was about making sure that he was perceived to be an alpha male. So really,
Absolutely.
so his life really becomes a love letter to his bros. And
Yes, and in addition to that, he shapes his entire world to
right,
be that no one says anything that absolutely would be contrary to what he wants.
right. He's very rigid. So this is the irony of him so he told everybody throughout the course of his life that he desperately wanted to be known as someone who changed the culture, sexual freedom, and really was lauding pleasure and that type of stuff. The irony, though, and this is ironic, is that he actually never could get there. So a lot of the A&E special and a lot of Holly Madison was like the Crystal before there was Crystal. He had women who were just interchangeable. He was not intimate with women, and he did not use women for pleasure. He never actually got to enjoy. One of his girlfriends in the 70s said the tragedy of him was that the money, sex, whatever it was that he was interested in at the time, he never really liked any of it. So he would throw these extravagant galas, and you would have all like John Belushi would be there, and Bill Cosby would be there, and all of this stuff. And as the gala was finishing, he would look to one of his guy friends and say, "Oh, well, tomorrow we've got to do something better." Like he wasn't getting the hit. He wasn't feeling the ecstasy.
No,
In the bedroom, even starting from his youth, he was not really he liked to be on the periphery, and he did a lot of videos to use for blackmail against political people, celebrities that he wanted to be able to control, who, if they were ever going to say anything against him. So
well,
this was not him enjoying it.
all
In
right.
other words,
I
it's not
I
joy.
am not as interested in Hefner as I am in her. I'm
Right.
interested in her surviving and coming back into that. And so that's why I want to know, when from you as a woman coming into this perspective, what was your take on Crystal's experience?
Well, I think she reminds me of how universal the female experience really is. It's universal. And then in the West and in modern times, it's very hard for me to find somebody who wouldn't get it. So body image, number one, every woman is sort of, her value is in how she looks, but not just how she looks to men, even men that she's not interested in. So a little boy, if he insults the body of like his female teacher,
Hmm.
he can crush her whole day.
Let me ask you something. You're saying the word her.
Hmm.
are you taking yourself out of the equation? This doesn't affect you, or is this also something you would experience?
Well, to be honest, I feel like I did not experience it as much until probably the last few years. I started noticing it much more, but I was hearing it from all of my girlfriends. So I was always,
How were you protected?
I think I was protected because, for whatever reason, I had maybe the way my mom raised me or something, but it's kind of the Sarah Silverman thing. Sarah Silverman said, her mom never told her as a little girl, you can do anything you want as a woman. She just never mentioned it. So Sarah just assumed she could do anything she wanted to do. I was never really told, oh, women have it so hard and you could do whatever you want. I just thought I could do whatever I wanted. I honestly did. And I probably had some really good emotional support around me. I never felt desperate for attention. Like Crystal talks a lot about how she was so willing to get all of these surgeries, which almost ended up killing her. She almost dies more than once
More
because of
than
it.
once.
Right. And she was willing to literally die to look away that the mansion and the brand, because it wasn't just really personally about Hef, it was literally like that brand and being the cover model. She was willing to die for all of that. I never, for whatever reason, I was in a different part of the culture where um I never remember feeling until more recently that my body had anything to do with my value. But remember, I was a model in my teenage years. That's true. But I was never going up for cover girl. I would have never wanted to be on the, to me, I didn't think that was cool. I did like magazines for money, like those Sears catalogs back in the 90s. You remember Sears catalogs. So they would just, these were not glamorous things, maybe some runways here and there at like a mall fashion show.
Sure, of course.
But again, I always was told that was my skill. Like they would train you. Like models have to be trained. It's not just what you're born with. There's a talent, there's a poise, there's a skill, there's balance. There's you have to the different It's not just like pretty people or models. Like you have to really work at it.
Well,
Um
you said that it wasn't until the last few years. What
mhm.
changed?
Well, I think quarantine changed a lot of it. So
Boy, it changed for a lot of people. So tell me
yeah,
more about that.
yeah, I think quarantine changed a lot of it. Like Crystal Hefner right now, if you go to her Instagram, which I encourage everybody to do, it's really a great Instagram, but she has had a lot of hate hurled at her. So like when you're dealing with social media and you're dealing with the female body on the social media, like I had to learn. It was only when I started going onto social media and I was doing that more during quarantine that I learned how, because people will say something to you online that they would never say to your face, like in a department
No.
store,
No, and
right?
then you get all these DMs that you have to filter through, as that we've talked about, how much that happens to you.
Right, exactly. But here's the thing, like I feel like men need to. So one of the things that Crystal talks about Hugh Hefner doing to undermine, and one of his other girlfriends said he broke me like you would break a horse. And
Mhm.
Crystal Hefner details the narcissistic, slow, like he would like pinch her hips and say, "Okay, well you're gaining a little weight here," or she
Mhm.
would just there were little intimate. And Crystal says, because this is the thing that all the women say and all of the men who worked at the mansion, they all tell us the same thing, whether they agree about other things or not. They all say people come there thinking there's going to be a lot of sex and pleasure, but it was like perfunctory, like no, like clinical, like no one was actually getting excited being there. Nobody, not unless they were like a guy who was there for like one night and they brought their own girlfriends and they got
Yeah.
to feel like a big, like if they wanted to tell their friends about it.
Right,
Yes, it was good
right.
for that. It was really good for that, but it wasn't a good place to get titillated or to have all of your fantasies met, because this was a like he had it all down to a routine that he
Right.
was not enjoying and they were not enjoying, and like nobody was enjoying it. And that's kind of the thing, which is that the one thing he said he was going to do for culture, he failed at. And he fails at like there was no intimacy, there was nothing titillating, there was nothing exciting or surprising. Like you just sit there and you just do the same things over and over again and nobody enjoys it. So Crystal, she gets into the mansion thinking that all of her dreams are coming true, her financial dreams, her career dreams, and she ends up finding out really quickly that this is really sad. Like it's kind of sad and dark, and there's this routine that hasn't changed in 50 years. And this guy is just like a sad little boy who wants to be fulfilled, but he's not willing to do any of the things that might fulfill him. And so she gets on board and she ends up kind of taking over the mansion at some point. She ends up legally
Well,
marrying
she
him.
became she became girlfriend number one, so she was the
Right,
top. But again, when we're talking about this is a hierarchy. There are a number of girlfriends. They would go in and they would and he would have she would bring others into the bedroom, and then they would have this as a normal part of their routine for
right,
years.
right. Now the thing is, she she calls the book, Only Say Good Things, because he told her before he died, just only say good things about me. And she starts the book by saying why she can no longer keep that promise to him because she's been through all this therapy and she has got to get her narrative out there. This is an intelligent woman. She's a creative woman.
Oh
Um,
yes.
and she was broken. And now here's the thing. I want to tell you what some of the quote unquote haters are talking about. So Candace Owens, she's like a right wing darling, and she weighed in on this. And I want to show you a little bit about what Candace said because it kind of is what a lot of people are saying.
And this is where I just have a little bit of an issue here because I was a 21-year-old young girl before. And the thing that I take issue with is people recategorizing the decisions that they made because they were young and they were stupid and they were immature. But undoubtedly, they were decisions that they made and pretending that suddenly they're victims, right? She's not saying that she came from a trailer park. She's not saying that she didn't have any access. He didn't find her in a strip club. She's saying that she was 21 and she wanted to go to a cool party. We've all been there before. I've been very open with you guys about the amount of Red Bull vodka that I consumed from the ages of 18 to 23, probably ages 18 to 24. If I'm being honest, I'm very honest with you guys about me waiting outside of a line at One Oak and, wanting to dance on a bar and next door at the Electric Room until 3 a.m. in the morning while I was living in the city in my early 20 years. But I don't pretend to recast those decisions as well. I was a victim when I was taken advantage of. Like, why did the bouncer let me in at 1 a.m. after I had consumed 8 Red Bull vodkas? He shouldn't have let me in. I really have an issue with women pretending that they're stupid.
Okay.
Okay. Did she read the same book we did?
So that's why I want us to get our voices out there. Thank you.
No, I'm sorry. That was completely a different experience than the way she framed it. I take a complete issue. She certainly puts herself in the car. She always takes responsibility for her decisions. She never says that she's a victim of them. Certainly that she had part of her family and what she was longing for. Some of her emotional immaturities and the things that were playing into it. Her desire for some financial stability that she was not having, and once she got it, it was like a heroin that she was never able to take back. And she was going, okay, now how am I? If I give this up, what do I have? Nothing to go back to. I did not go to college. I did not do, how. And so it's being part in within that. But I never heard her one time frame herself as I'm a poor little victim and I just had
Right.
I didn't see that at all.
I
So,
never heard that from her.
but
Never.
then again, this is where we have biases, right?
Right.
Right. I mean, we sit down and if we go into a book like this and already have a bias coming in, then I'm not going to hear
Mm-hmm.
the other parts. And it's obvious that she didn't hear She didn't
Right.
hear the
Like
other.
people are buying this book. So a lot of the old girls from the mansion are buying this book and going out on their podcasts and tearing her down and saying, oh, she was the manipulative one and all of this stuff. And here's the thing, like we weren't there, but I will tell you, I can only judge
She
the book.
she owns her
Right. She
manipulation.
owns all of it.
She
She talks about
owns
the
that she
environment.
did that. She
Right.
owns that she manipulated the other girls and
Right.
that she had that she, worked to make sure that she was still the top number one girlfriend, and that this was the system. This was the game
Hmm.
that was played. But she owns that. She
Right.
owns her own darkness and her own role in that.
Right. I mean, it's like the Stockholm syndrome sort of thing. So people will, when people are in a toxic environment and they have to go into survival mode, and you're in a toxic relationship, like Hef made sure two things. He wanted the girls to always fight over him, and then when they did, he would get really upset. So that was a thing that he needed for his ego, because remember, he couldn't get girls in high school or college or whatever. So he needed to see girls fighting over him, but then when it happened, the conflict would tear him up. So he's constantly creating a scenario that he hates. He's constantly punishing himself, and she's a
I,
part of
I
it.
didn't get that as much as you did. You
Yeah,
must.
well, that's the thing. So as a man, like it's interesting how what you're picking up on. Women are picking up on women deal. There's not going to be one woman who's commenting right now. If you're a woman, replay or not, comment right now if I'm telling the truth. There's not one woman who's going to say that they haven't been on the opposite end of the female competition weapon. Women are awful to one another, and they will fight tooth and nail. And Crystal really goes into that. And everyone, woman reading that, including the women who are detracting from her, including the other girlfriends, when they read the book, they were like, oh, that is exactly what it is like. No one says that that's not what it was like. But Hef is holding all the cards. And one of the things he's doing is he makes sure that they don't have lives outside of the mansion.
Absolutely.
So
If you're going to stay in the mansion, you have a curfew, you have an allowance,
mhm.
and need to know where you spend it, what you do. I mean, that you're under. If you play in this environment, you play by this set of constrictive rules.
Right, exactly. And so to Candace Owens' point, when she's like, "Oh, there's nothing to complain about. You knew what you were signing up for, or whatever." It's like, well, okay, Crystal says all that, so you can't really take away from her. She's saying all that, but here's the thing: Hef
Did you
is
hear his complaints though? She didn't complain. She just laid it out what it was like.
right, exactly,
And
exactly.
I saw, or at least in my hearing of it, as I have, is that she took responsibility
Hmm.
for her decisions. I
It
certainly
was
there were times when she was controlled, and she was, the curfews that happened, and she was pulled back and stopped from leaving the mansion. There were certain times when you're doing that. I mean, and she laid that out. But
right.
I did not see this as a victim.
No, she's definitely not a victim at all. Now, Crystal did come. I'm seeing comments about underprivileged girls being manipulated and stuff. Yes, absolutely. Crystal is very honest about that. She says there's Hef targeted women who were very insecure, had tragedies and low confidence, and who would be easily gullible and manipulated. Of course, a full confident woman is not going to sign up for that kind of life. I mean, he
It
knows what
isn't, but all right, but again, you're looking at young women who are in that 18 to 24 range. Everything hasn't wired up.
right.
It's still you're dealing with a lot of
Mhm.
immaturity that we haven't had time to really to build and to grow.
Absolutely. So I think a great thing, I just want to wrap up with what you asked me and just say that yes, so as a woman, body image is a really big deal. So men can choose to elevate the women that they have access to, and to let them know they're desirable, they're lovable, and to not forget that. Like a lot of men will be very hands off with appearance because they think Me Too movement, or, oh, I'm going to be seen a certain way. There are ways that you can compliment women on the internet, or women that you hardly know, in a way that makes them feel seen and heard and beautiful. And women do a lot of that maintenance with one another. Like, two women, if they don't even know each other, they'll be like, oh, you look so sexy today, or blah, blah, blah. Gay men are really good about doing that with women. And one of the reasons why women like to be around gay men is they will affirm the woman's sexual desirability. They're so easy to do that. But I feel like men usually will hold back from that, not understanding that there are certain places where that's really, really needed to affirm. Hugh Hefner is someone who learned how to um, play on all of the women's fears, like, oh, their shape is not perfect, or whatever. They're not going to get cover girl. They're not blonde enough. They're not, whatever. He had his rubric that they worked. So, um, you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say we're not going to affirm women's physical desirability, because that really had tragic consequences. So I'm glad that Crystal talks so much about her dealing with her body image over time, and she ends up taking the implants that were killing her out. She ends up she tries to go back to more of a natural body and love her body as it is, and to be around people who affirm that in her. I think she's dating someone now who's like really good for her in that way. But that's very important. Men tend to overdo it when they'll go like, oh, I really like your personality, and they'll never mention anything else, and they think that's what the woman wants to hear. Hef was really good at understanding what women actually want to hear, but then he would use that against them. So there's a nice way to do that. But as a man, you're reading this book, you were listening to this book, and I think we should end on your. I really think we should end. And I see all your comments coming in, fantastic comments. And yeah, I started talking about the A&E docuseries because it was such a landmark sort of thing. But thank you so much, guys. But Dennis, why don't you take us out by, as a man, when you're reading all this, was there anything that surprised you? Was there anything that sort of bothered you? Did you look at like yourself? Did you think back to like being in the 70s, and like, was Playboy different really than what you had thought it would be? Did you sort of think it would be better or more interesting, or?
It was exactly as I thought it would be. It
Mm,
was very, very much so, but I never got a chance to see it from her point of view. I could only see it from the male point of view. So I never got a chance to talk about that, really to read about that and to learn about that. And I just think it's such a precious, wonderful thing that Crystal was able to write this book and to give us an insight from her perspective, not from Hef's. I think we got a lot from his perspective and his fantasy about what he was, which is one of the reasons why he didn't want her to say anything that was negative about it, because he wanted to control the narrative in every situation, absolutely to control that narrative, and that's impossible. It's impossible to do, but he did the best that he could, and then left the scene, and she gets an opportunity to be able to talk about her journey for healing and wholeness, and what she has to do, because each one of us has to have that opportunity, and because we all have to come to terms with what we're doing on the planet. And I was very impressed with Crystal and what she did, and so I highly recommend it. Because if you have any interest in the culture, any interest in what this time from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and the place that Playboy had in the zeitgeist and in the mental, as far as the sexual revolution, it had a piece of it, but it wasn't the whole thing. That was just the veneer, and what was happening is far more complex, and Crystal tells that story.
right. Excellent. So hopefully you guys will go out and buy the book, read the book by Crystal Hefner.
Or do what I did. Your library, wherever you have your library, and if you sign up for a library card, and you can go through there, very often you will see that they will have audiobooks and and ebooks. So our library in Austin has many books, and this is how I was able to get the book and being able to do this, because I know it's expensive and I know that I have, but try the library and the libraries, and it does support the author, because the libraries buying those copies does support the author. So it's a win-win proposition.
All right. Great. Really great point. All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in R&D Cafe, and we will be back next time.